In this video, we're going to show you to install the starter on your Ford Taurus, located just above your transmission. With the hood open, go ahead and locate your ground terminal on your battery. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to go ahead and loosen this nut right here. Loosen that and pull it off and set it aside. We want to follow our air intake tube back to the throttle body, and we're going to use an 8mm socket to loosen the hose clamp here. Once that's loose, come on down here, and there's a hose right here connecting to the side. There's a little gray clip. You're going to gently pull that out and back. That's going to allow you to go ahead and pop that hose off. On the air filter lid here, there's going to be two spring clips down at the bottom. Pop those off. And we're going to pull this up as well as pull this back a little bit. Now on the back here, before we yank this off, there is a vacuum hose right here. We just need to pull that up and off. That's it. Let's go ahead and work this off. Lift up, and as you pull it out, there's these three tabs here that need to come out of the air filter base. Go ahead and set that aside. Let's go ahead and remove our 8mm screws up top here. I'll lift this up. Now this next step I like to do, it's not always necessary. However, this piece here, there are adjustments available on this here. And I want to make sure that when we disconnect our transmission linkage from the adapter here, that everything matches up. I know it's a safety lock. I'm going to put a piece of tape here where that butts up against it. And I'm just going to wrap it. So that way there I know when we pop this off, it goes back in the same exact spot. You use a pocket screwdriver, and right here there's a little tab you want to gently lift up. You don't want to lift it up and crack this off, but gently lift it up. Now this tab here needs to go towards the engine, so you're going to lift it up just a little bit and then push it over. And sometimes this can be stuck. There it is. I use a screwdriver and gently pry up on this. Just pop that up and off. And if you rotate that, you can see it's just a ball and socket design. And if you follow the transmission cable back, it comes to this mounting bracket. And we went ahead and sprayed this down with some rust penetrant. We need to go ahead and pull this up and out of that bracket. Gently rock it. Okay. Now that we have that slipped up and out, we can go ahead and set this aside. Go ahead and tuck the wire harness down underneath the battery here. I'm going to need as much room as possible to operate. Now right here we have our transmission shifter bracket, and this bolted to the shaft right here. I'm going to go ahead and spray a little bit of rust penetrant on this. Now, this next step here that we're going to do is pretty important. You want to make sure that you're working on flat level ground and possibly even chock the wheels. You want to go ahead and lock the vehicle, because this here, if you bump this and happen to put it into neutral, well, the car is going to roll away on you and you're going to have a much larger issue than a starter. So we want to go ahead and loosen this nut and remove that. We're going to pull this bracket off. Using a 15mm socket and our extension and driver here, we're going to go ahead and loosen and remove that nut. Save that nut, we'll be reusing that later. Once you have that off, you want to go ahead and wiggle that bracket free. You're going to wiggle it back and forth, not side to side. Now this is keyed, so you don't have to worry about screwing that up as far as getting that in the right position. Let's go ahead and set that aside. On the starter solenoid, we're going to have a 13mm nut on the top here. You can use a ratchet, or you can use your gear wrench or a regular wrench. You do want to go ahead and loosen and remove that nut. And then pop that off. We have this wire right here. It comes around and there's a 10mm nut on the other side. Go ahead and use that ratchet. Break that free. And then pull that wire off. Now our starter is held in place by two 13mm bolts. There's one just on the top there and then one down over here. On the top one, we can go ahead and use some straight extensions and get right to it. Use that 13mm socket. You can try your impact driver. If that doesn't work, just switch over to a breaker bar or just a good old ratchet and go ahead and break that free. Reach down there and pull that out. On the lower bolt, I'm going to use a swivel and come in right behind the starter solenoid. Once you pop that on there, you can kind of push that hose over a little bit. There we go. Get that lower bolt out. Reach down and grab that starter. You're going to lift it up. And we just need to wiggle that up and out. There it is. Now once you get your starter out, if you happen to see all kinds of debris like this down on the top side of the transmission area, strongly suggested go ahead and grab a vacuum and clean that out. And go ahead and feed that starter down. There's a wiring harness there you're going to lift up on. Drop that down into position. I'm going to go ahead and get the upper bolt started here on that starter. Okay. Now the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to try and thread these in with my extension. Now you can use the swivel through here if you want. As you've seen earlier, I was able to finagle this in here. It's not the greatest because now you have the resistance of the two hoses kind of pinching this, but if you can get that in there, that'll work just as fine. That'll work just as good. I'm just going to run these down as far as I can by hand. And we'll snug them down with a ratchet by hand. I'm not going to use a power tool to drive this in. And then we'll come on back and torque them down. I'm going to torque down these two bolts to 35 foot-pounds. New starter should have a nut and lock washer in place. We're going to remove those, set that aside, and then same on the back one. And due to clearance issues here, because the stud's a little bit longer on this one here, I'm just going to use my open end 10mm wrench to go ahead and tighten this down. Give it a little wiggle, make sure that's good and secured. Then you want to grab the larger wire here, pop that on. Now there is a tab on this here that should come down and kind of create a stop right here. I want to make sure that's positioned properly. Install the lock washer, followed by the nut. I'm going to go ahead and secure that one. Once it's bottomed out, good quarter turn, make sure it's good and tight, give it a wiggle, make sure that it does not spin. Now before we install our shifter bracket here, it's not necessary, but it's always a good practice. You want to make sure that that pivot ball is good and clean. You don't want to have any resistance on there. I'm going to use my bristle brush here and clean off this ball stud. Once that's clean, go ahead and line that up onto the shifter linkage, onto that transmission there. Install the nut. Make sure that's good and tight. Before installing the linkage, I'm going to put a little bit of silicone paste on that ball stud. You're going to bring your linkage down. Let's go ahead and install the back section here first. Now this little tab right here, there's a little button right here. And this actually locks in, if I can move this out of the way. Right here, the metal bracket has a hole in it. So when you push this down and on, it should snap into that. There it is. You're going to feel it lock into place, so you know that that's secured. Go ahead and take this here. You're going to line that up. Now remember, this here can move back and forth. We put the tape on here. So make sure that your plastic locking tab is up against that tape. Line this up. pop that on. Make sure that your linkage is lined up with that tape. And then push this over so it locks in. Now at this point here, we're going to go ahead and remove the tape. There we go. Now when installing the lower portion of the airbox, you have two studs on the bottom that are going to fit into the grommets. Lower this down into position. And feel those pop into place. Just going to install the two 8mm bolts there. Once those bottom out, give them a little bit more. They do have rubber bushings there. Just snug that down. Let's go ahead and get our airbox set up here. I'm going to go ahead and put the tabs in to our airbox base, wiggle those in, then we'll go ahead and lower this down into position. Now you want to make sure that the flexible portion here slips over the throttle body. You don't want that to roll over or bind. Make sure that's seated. Clip your airbox spring clips here. Install this hose, push it on. It's locked in. Push on the vacuum hose on the back. Let's go ahead and tighten down our hose clamp. I just popped that vacuum hose off there just so I can get clearance with my ratchet. You want to make sure that's good and snug. Grab that ground terminal, slide that over. Make sure that's twisted all the way down. Go ahead and snug this down. Now I'm using a hand ratchet. You don't want to over tighten these here. Using power tools is going to be easier to do that. So snug that down and then give that a twist. Make sure that's good and secure. At that point there, you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.